Hey, what's up guys, Mashine here, come back with a brand new video for you guys. Today we're going to be talking about CSGO hype. We're going quite general here. We're going to be talking about hype as a whole, what's really going on there, and how you might be able to potentially see where that peak is going to be. And now this obviously isn't going to be guaranteed, however, it's going to give you a bit of insight on when you usually see the peaks and everything to do with that. Before we hop on into it though, if you guys are looking to pick up any CSGO skins, I've got a couple links down in the description, and let's hop on into it. Now while hype does come pretty much everywhere, we're going to be focusing in on cases right away. Now we're going to be heading over to a site called pricestalker.eu. It's going to be very useful when you're checking out if you should be possibly investing into one of these cases, and it's one you should really be checking out if you're going to do so. Now we're going to be heading on over to the breakout case here, and we're going to be heading back around 8 months to the summer of 2021. Now during the summer of 2021, and especially that first month when we're looking at June here, we saw a lot of prices go absolutely crazy before they started to come back down to reality. Now, one of the big reasons for this is the very small quantity we see on the market. Now, looking at this graph here, you're going to see a couple things. First up, that green line, that's going to be the amount sold daily. Now, this is very important because that yellow line is going to be the amount of cases listed on the Steam market. We're going to be heading over to the fourth dashed red line, or the one farthest to the right here, as that's really where we're going to be focusing in. That was the day that Valve decided to get rid of the non-prime pool and caused a massive hype throughout the CSGO investing market. As you can see here, the amount of listings for the breakout case dropped significantly. We're looking from around 30,000 all the way down to below 10,000. Now this obviously had a very direct correlation to the price going up very quickly. This is something we see a lot. Usually almost every hype that we see is because there is two types of growth. We usually see sustained growth, which is not bad growth necessarily, however, it's usually moving a little bit too quickly and could possibly get out of control sometimes, and that will turn into unsustained growth. Now, unsustained growth is what we're seeing right here. This is where we see the price absolutely go crazy and the volume go super low when we're looking at what's listed on the market. The volume sold is going to be very high, however, the volume listed on the market is going to be very low. Looking at the breakout graph here, we can kind of throw that into context. Now in the pink we have our sustained growth. Now this growth necessarily isn't bad, like I mentioned, it can possibly be good. However, when we see that big red, that's the unsustained growth. That's where the price is going up very quickly, our quantity listed is dropping extremely quickly as well, and that's where we're seeing that price go very high and then fall right back down. Now, after every piece of unsustainable growth, we usually see a recovery period afterwards. This is what we saw after that big hype in the beginning of June. We saw throughout July and most of August as well, where we saw prices slowly come back to what they were originally, however, just maybe 10% higher. This is something to really watch out for because this could possibly be a great period to buy back into everything you just sold. However, you still need to be very careful as to not buy into something that's on a downward trend still. Like I mentioned before, hype can be a really good thing for the growth of items. We're going to see some of those items have to be going away. Not every single one of those is going to be put back into the investing area. At least some of them are going to be opened, and more likely than not, it's going to be a higher amount than normally would have been there because people are trying to get in on a little bit of that action. However, sometimes the hype can go against an item. Now, when we're looking at something like a prime drop case, or more recently, the danger zone case that just got taken out of the prime drop rotation, we can see here on the graph that the hype really didn't help it out at all. And this is something we're starting to see more and more common, that when we're looking at these newer cases that have such a high amount of supply, it really isn't doing much. You can see the danger zone case here, that yellow line, which is the listings, drops down significantly around to that 700,000 mark, but after that, it's right back up to where it started, or potentially even higher at that 1.2 million mark. So it's something like this that's really going to be very interesting moving forward to see if we're going to see this trend or this pattern followed with almost every prime case, where we're going to see that price spike and then it's going to go right back to the same price or potentially even lower because there is just so many listings out there for these cases. We're going to be heading away from cases here now, but the big thing I want to point out with this section is you can kind of predict when that market hype is going to potentially be there. If you're seeing a lot of cases on this downward trend in supply, that could potentially lead to a big increase in price very soon. Now, the one really unfortunate thing about hype is it doesn't always have to be natural. And now I don't necessarily consider this hype natural because it's very weird. It was very influenced by Valve. We saw this hype come because all of these non-prime cases went into the rare drop pool. However, there is some outside factors that can be contributing to one thing more than another. Specifically looking at that CS20 case. You can see the graph of the CS20 case here, and right below it you can see the Spectrum 2. Now the CS20 calls a very weird pattern. You can see that obviously we have that big drop off in the amount of listings and the supply is going down significantly off the market. This makes sense because a lot of people are going to be investing into the CS20 case here. However, we can see that on June 8th, we kind of hit a peak, a very short-term peak here, but we're still at 160,000, and then right after that we go all the way down to 85,000, which is only a couple days later, which causes a really interesting question, because when we look at the Spectrum 2 case here, we don't see that at all. We see that around the 8th we're sitting at 110,000, and then just a couple days later we're sitting at 95,000, so really not even a significant amount. That's less than 12%, 15% here, so that's nothing crazy in the context of this scenario here. Now, other than the one big reason of investing in hype like this is because of FOMO, there is another reason, and that's going to be potentially some market manipulation by people who have a large influence. We can see videos that have 17,000 views that just happen to come out on that day that we see the peak, and then we see our supply drop by 50%. Now, overall, when we're looking at hype here, it can really be applicable to any item. We're starting to see it a lot with the Stockholm and Riptide items just because those are the ones that are in the spotlight right now. The biggest thing about these items that are seeing a lot of hype is there's going to be a couple similar factors. One, they're usually not going to have a super high amount listed. We've mentioned that already. However, it's the biggest factor here. When the amount listed is very low, we're going to see price differences between items. We're not going to see 1,000 at 1 cent higher than the previous next one. We're going to see 5, 10, 20, 25 between each cent range, and that makes it very easy for a price to go up 20% if it's sitting at $1 and only 1,000 of these cases are bought, but there's only a couple listed at each price point. We're going to see that price go up significantly higher than if we saw an active duty case and 1,000 are bought from that. My biggest piece of advice to not getting burned by these CSGO market hypes is look at the quantity and compare it to where it was in the past. As we saw these items, almost every single one went back up in quantity after this market hype passed, and the prices returned to at least somewhat close to what they were beforehand. Now we're looking at maybe 25% increases off where they were, but that's still down significantly from the tip of that peak, and that's something that you should really be looking at if you now want to invest into this item, is not buying at the peak, but rather buying on the collapse afterwards. This is going to be the most free profit you can potentially get instead of buying at the very peak, because if you buy at the very peak, you've got almost zero chance of making profit unless it's selling at the next peak, whereas if you buy it on the downfall, the next peak comes around and you can sell it pretty much anywhere on that uptrend for some easy profit. But that is really all I have for today, guys. One thing I do want to mention is I did mention easy profit. Now, this is no guarantee you're going to make profit. However, this is positioning yourself in the best chance that you will most likely be making profit if you are able to sell at the correct time. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.